Hello, and thank you for joining us for Changer Chats. I'm Grant Venable, Director of Change at Be the Change Volunteers. Today, our guest is Danielle Craven, a new changer who recently went on her very first volunteer service trip to Malawi with Be the Change Volunteers. The trip was very special for Danielle because it was dedicated to the legacy of her grandfather, a BTCV veteran changer, the late Joe Ford. Today, we're going to learn from Danielle about what it is like to be a first-time volunteer with BTCV on a phase one with a brand new partner and a brand new community. Danielle, welcome to Changer Chats.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk a little bit about my grandpa and to talk a little bit about the trip. Yeah, I'm just excited.
Well, perfect. That's what we want to do. I want to start by talking about your grandpa because we do want to hear about the trip, but really this trip was inspired by your grandpa Joe. So your grandpa Joe was a truly incredible guy. And I had the great pleasure of knowing him because he would invite us to speak at many of his service clubs, but he also was foundational behind this trip. He is the point of contact for our community partner, Jonathan Condodo in Malawi. And I remember getting the application from Joe and working through it with him. And of course, towards the end of the application process, Joe tragically passed away. And we didn't know if the project would move forward. But Jonathan, his partner in Malawi, completed all of the requirements. And so we put the process through our board of directors review, and they voted to continue with the project. So before we go on about the project, just tell us about your grandpa Joe.
Yeah, good old Joe. Yeah, growing up, my grandpa, we always called him like the pig scientist. You
Yeah.
know, he like went to Harvard, he did all these great things. So he's always been a pretty cool guy. But in 2010, that's really when he started traveling a lot for like the Fuller Center, Habitat for Humanity, and things
Uh-huh.
like that. And that's when he became even more cool to me because he would go to all these fun places. But yeah, my grandpa, on top of like just being a cool dude, he was really humble and pretty private. So when you mix those two things together, we actually, or me, I'll speak for just myself. I actually didn't know too much about his travels and like his experiences with his travels. I knew that he wanted to build a home on every continent. He made it one short. And yeah, I knew like building homes, eventually getting into education was like a passion of his. And it was actually when he was in Peru with the Fuller Center, I believe, is when he came across like a flyer or something for Be the Change.
Yeah, it was
And
Papua New Guinea. He was down in the
oh,
South
yes,
Pacific. Yeah.
yes, it was Papua New Guinea. And yeah, so that's how that connection kind of came to be. So I was really excited for this trip because it allowed me to, I knew my grandpa Joe as my grandpa. And so this trip allowed me to kind of step in his shoes in a way that I have like never have before. So I was really, really excited and looking forward to this trip.
Well, Danielle, the backstory is really cool with your grandpa Joe because I got an email in my inbox one day, and it was from Joe Ford, and it said, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you about your organization. I live in Maryville, Missouri." And I replied, I said, "Oh, well, you must know my in-laws, Paul and Carla Taylor, because they live in Maryville, Missouri, and it's a small town. So I
Mhm.
just assume when I get an email from someone I don't know in Maryville, it's because it's a small town and that's how they met." And he
Mhm.
said, "No, I actually don't know them. I found out about you in Papua New Guinea, an island in the South Pacific, thousands of miles away. And that's just how small our world is. What a coincidence that there was no other connection than him walking up to a BTCV partner school, taking a picture of a logo and looking us up online, only to find out that we have a lot in common." So that's just so cool as far
Mhm.
as how Joe found out about us. But then, once the board approved the project, and Joe wasn't in the picture for the project anymore, really the torch kind of got passed. And I didn't know as the director what to expect. I knew that once we approve a project, we've decided we're going to do it as an organization. So we knew we were going to build classroom number one, no matter what. But I really didn't know how involved the Ford family would be in that process. And so
Mhm.
I remember calling your Aunt Jennifer. And first, I'd called just to tell her that, give our condolences as an organization. And but I said, we're gonna move forward with this project. I'm just letting you know, if anybody wants to be involved, let me know and we'll figure it out. And so that kind of led into an email chain with your Aunt Jennifer. And she got back to me pretty quickly and said, "Hey, we're going to bring a bunch of people." And I thought, okay, you're going to bring 4 or 5 people. You brought over half the team.
Yeah.
The Ford family came with 14 volunteers, and we brought 6 veteran volunteers, which included 2 team leaders. And so you were the team. You guys really were the team. Talk to me about your Aunt Jennifer getting it all together.
Yeah. So I guess a little bit before then, before my grandpa Joe had passed, my aunt Jen, my mom, and then their stepsisters they had gifted my grandpa Joe something that the 4 of them would go on a build with my grandpa.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, he passed away before that was able to happen. So I think when this opportunity came for the possibility of like the family to go on this build, it was kind of a no-brainer. Like, yeah, Jen did kind of become the point person,
Yeah,
but
she did.
yeah, but she put out some feelers for the family. And at the time, the trip to Malawi felt so far away that it was like, oh yeah, like that would be cool, you know. But the more we kind of heard about the build and that there was going to be a classroom like in my grandpa's name, when he passed away, it was less than a year into COVID. So that made funeral arrangements really difficult. We weren't able to have a service until like just under a year after he passed. So there wasn't a lot of closure there. So I think a lot of people saw this build as even more closure. And yeah, just through conversations, 14 of us were like, all right, let's do it.
So you decided you're going, and your mom went, of
Yes.
course. And so I'm sure you all are talking behind the scenes. You're getting these emails from Be the Change volunteers and from me, and they say, this is your preparation packet. This is your volunteer information sheet. Fill all these forms out, send them back to us. But you're still mentally preparing. What are some of the things you did to mentally prepare and physically prepare? Not just what did you read about or think about, but what did you pack?
Yeah, no, these are good questions. It's funny, at first, for the Malawi trip, I was actually a hard no. I was like, nope, like that's the farthest I would have ever traveled. There's a lot of unknowns. I'm fine. But then the more I thought about it, I was like, I can't not go. And I'm very, very grateful I changed my mind.
Yeah, you don't strike me as a hard no. You're a very courageous person. So you strike me as
Yeah.
a yes.
Oh, well, nope, I was not at the time. But yeah, then I changed my mind. But no, all the communication and stuff was incredibly helpful. I hadn't traveled that far. We have not done a build before. So it was really helpful just like getting the packing list and everything. But like some ways that I prepared is I have like a really sensitive stomach, especially when I travel.
Mm-hmm.
So for a couple months before we left, I was like, okay, Danielle, you need to make sure you are taking care of your body. So I was just like eating right. I was making sure I was getting movement in. And then mentally,
It's hard to mentally prepare for something that you don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're getting into.
Exactly. No, I think that's a great way to put it. And because this trip was just meaningful too, because it was like revolved around my grandpa. Yeah, I'm trying to think.
I wonder if it was the whole go with the flow mentality. And I kind of feel like, so we'll get this next question that I have for you is about the travel and the delays. And you guys had a serious delay at the beginning because of United Airlines. And I don't care if United Airlines hears me because it was their fault and we confirmed it. But you guys had a serious delay. And I got on the phone with your aunt and she said, we're just going with the flow. And I thought, wow, I didn't expect that, but that is the definition of how your family really handled everything. Y'all went with the flow. So just the travel to Malawi is far. It's really far. Talk to me about the travel, and it's discomfortable. It's not comfortable. Tell us about it.
Yeah, that was something that when you talk about mentally preparing for, I was trying to conceptualize the travel because, yeah, it took us about 4 flights to get there. One of those flights was 14 hours long. So that was on my mind. But yeah, day of, we get to the Kansas City airport at 4:30 in the morning, ready to go. And we go to get our boarding passes, and were not able to, because 2 days prior our flights got adjusted a little bit, which none of
Right.
us got anything of. And we ended up we were flying from Chicago to Ethiopia, and we ended up being switched and having a 12-hour, 25-minute layover in Ethiopia.
Right.
When we went to get our boarding passes and check our bags in, yeah, United told us like, oh, it's a hard no. You have to have an Ethiopian visa since you're going to be in Ethiopia for more than 12 hours, 25 minutes more.
Yeah.
So we very quickly realized we were not catching our 6:30 a.m. flight. And I actually think because there was such a big group of us, we all could laugh about it and really go with the flow. It kind of became a joke, like, all right, well, we just got to go with the flow here. But luckily, we were able to get our flights changed. And that night, like 12 hours later, we got on our flight. But yeah,
our travel agent Azar got on the phone and explained that we're one of the 37 countries allowed to enter Ethiopia and get a visa on arrival. So you guys had no problems after Azar communicated that, which is why it's great to have a great travel agent when you're doing these kinds of trips.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, shout out, because
shout out for sure.
Yeah.
So keep going. So you finally get on the plane, and then it's a long trip.
Man, yeah. So the most like anxious I was about this 14-hour trip, 14-hour flight. But it wasn't as bad as like a 14-hour flight sounds like it could be. Like, we had like 3 meals on the flight.
Yeah.
We had movies.
Not bad.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. It was like I had some like rice and veggies. Like it honestly wasn't terrible. But so after we hit that hurdle of that 14-hour flight, we just had quick like 2-hour, 1-hour flights after that, which seemed like nothing.
Yeah.
But then when we landed, we had our car ride or bus ride to the lodge, which I was like, oh, okay, 4 hours. We've been traveling this far. What's another 4 hours?
But that's then like Kansas City to St. Louis.
Right. That's what I said. I was like, okay, I can do this. I can do this. But then 4 hours turned into like 4.5 and then like 5. And I was like, okay, we're almost there. Yeah. But it was a long trip, but ultimately it was fine. There was, other than that hiccup at the beginning, there was no issues.
I think you guys might have been so exhausted that you were like, how much longer can it take? Who knows? My body's given up on me at this point.
Yeah,
you
my
guys
head
really
was
that in stride. And because of the flight delay, typically the team gets off the plane in Lilongwe, Malawi, and they get to go to a hotel, stretch out, and then we take off the next morning. Well, you guys got picked up that next morning afternoon instead, and we had to keep moving. But we got back on schedule because you guys were flexible, because you went with it. Yeah. So we're grateful for your flexibility on that. Danielle, day one, we sleep at the lodge, and then day one is a cultural exchange day. Whenever we can do that. And cultural exchange for BTCV is really trying to hands-on, in-depth, learn about the community, the area, the school, the story of the school. So just talk to us about that day one, because before we talk about your time as a volunteer and all the other things, I want to know what you took away from arriving on site and getting the story from the teachers and touring the community.
Yeah, day one, when we got off the bus and we met the community for the first time, I think what was going through my head was I felt nervous for how the community was going to receive us. Like, I was like, oh, are they going to be like, who are these people like coming in here? I don't know, just anxieties like that. But the complete opposite is what we received when we got off the bus. Like immediately we're getting handshakes. The students were like sitting outside waiting for us, like waving to us. And very quickly I was like, oh, I have no reason to be nervous. They're incredibly welcoming. They're happy we're here. We're happy we're here. And then you could just feel like this sense of community with the people we literally just met.
Yeah, our community partner really had that organized. That's why it's so important to have a strong community partner. It was so well organized.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. And I'm thinking we even walked around like the village a little bit. We heard from some members within the community. Yeah, it was good. I think it was a really good way to welcome us in, because Was it the next day we started?
Yeah, so that first day we got up and we did a little mini safari, and then we
Mhm.
went out to the school. Talk to us about, Macumba Village. When we think of the villages, a lot of times we think, there's half a dozen shops and there's all these
Mhm.
things, but really Macumba, there's nothing. I mean, you cannot buy a Coca-Cola in Macumba, and there's many villages in Africa that you can buy a Coca-Cola.
Yeah, I think even just on the bus ride to the village and to the school campus, you start seeing like homes few and far between, and they're all made out of like this mud brick
Yep.
that we got to know so well.
Yep.
And yeah, no running water, no electricity. So I think part of me, I kind of prepared in my head that that is something that, we could see. I was like, there's a reason we were going to this particular village to help with this build.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't naive in that sense.
Right.
Um, but I think what really just stood out to me the most was how like incredibly like happy the kids were and like joyful
Yeah.
and
I think when you prepare yourself for all that, also, you don't get culture shock. You get a feeling of affirmation. All right, the
mm,
problem is as bad as I thought it was, and now
mhm.
I'm here to help. Right.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For
Let's
sure.
let's talk about this. So we're gonna get into the work, but
Mhm,
I want people who are listening that are thinking about going on a trip to
mhm.
get some affirmation of their own that they'll be taken care of. So talk to us about the food, the transport, the accommodations. How did BTCV do with all that? How did our community partners do with all that?
Yeah. Okay, so I will say I'm a person who, I tend to think, okay, what's the worst thing that could happen or worst case scenario or get nervous of little things. And something I was nervous for was food. Like,
Yeah.
what am I going to eat? Especially, I'm vegetarian. I'm like, what if I don't know, what if there's no food or whatever? So I actually packed like 60 snack bars, like protein bars and trail mix, because I was like, okay, if there's nothing I can eat, or if my stomach gets upset, at least I have these things. Or, if I need more food, I have extra food. We were fed so well.
Yeah.
Like I was taking pictures of all my meals. They were delicious. I every time I almost got hungry, food right there. It was either breakfast or it was time for lunch or it was dinner.
Uh-huh.
So like we got treated really well with the food. And the transportation was great because we were in this bus. I didn't know what to expect with transportation, but we got a really comfortable bus, and that was very grateful for that.
Yeah.
Um, and even with the lodging, like I think before you had sent like one or two photos of what our lodging might have looked like.
Yeah.
And when I showed up or when we showed up, I felt the pictures didn't do the place justice,
Yeah.
and I'm like, this is awesome. We have running water, we have a toilet we can flush, we
Yeah.
have beds, but like I felt like we were really taken care of, especially because I'm like, I know this could be not as comfortable as it is for us right now.
Yeah.
And it was
Two
good.
people to thank for that. Our community partner,
Mhm.
Jonathan Condoto, and then our director of field operations for Africa, Tato and Bea. Those guys are the ones behind all of those things working out, running
Yeah.
smoothly. It was a phase one for me too. So I was impressed by all of it. Really, really pleased with it. Okay. So BTCV projects are typically focused on a single piece of infrastructure. And for this one, the phase one was classroom one of a multi-classroom total campus plan. And we've collaborated on that total campus plan with the community, with the village chiefs, with the heads of school. But in this case, we arrived and the classroom construction was for the most part completed and done. And that's because we don't overregulate the professional builder that we hire to do the classroom. If we show up and there's general labor tasks that we can help with, we pitch in on that. But we always use a professional contractor so that the construction is sound and correct for that community. So in this case, we were able to work on some other aspects of the school. And because it's such a huge multi-acre campus, there were some cool things that we could do. One of them was the soccer field, which was a lot of heavy equipment. But then there were some other side projects that we were able to do, including a library. Just talk to us about the work, the variety of work, and what kinds of work you did at the project.
Yeah. So I guess just going off like the soccer field, that was day one. Our task was to clear this, big old area from like get some debris out, get some
Yeah.
weeds out, all the things. And what was really cool, actually, something that I wanted to add, that was just fun to walk into, were like all of the kids that came to help, like all of the soccer players from around that came to
Yeah.
help clear that space out. Like,
Children and adults. Yeah.
yes, yeah, no, that was so fun to see because there was no way that the 20 of us would have been able to make a dent in that field if it was not for everybody helping us.
You don't realize how big a soccer field is until you're clearing one.
No, I did question. I was like, is this bigger than it needs to be? You know? But but yeah, so that was part of it. Yeah, they have a lot of what they call like mud brick. So we were
Yep.
using that a lot. We made some stairs to go into some of their older school
Yeah,
buildings.
great classrooms.
Yeah, their classrooms. And then we used it. They also had planted trees. I don't know if that was on something that we were supposed to do as the volunteers, but when we showed up, like the community had already planted trees all the way around the like
Yeah.
perimeter of the campus.
One of my favorite parts of the project, huh?
Yeah, no, that was awesome. I'm excited for years to come when they start to really like thrive and get big. But yeah, so we just put some like mud brick around those trees so that students wouldn't step on them. I mixed some concrete for the first time in my life, which was an experience.
You did great.
Yeah, thanks.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about what you did with mixing the concrete because I like to say nothing brings a community together like games. And in a lot of these communities, you know, you drive around Malawi, particularly southern Malawi, and you see communities coming out in the evenings on the weekends to watch soccer matches. So soccer's huge, but you are a volleyball coach, and you had contacted us and asked about bringing volleyballs. And so I said, yeah, sure, bring volleyballs. In my mind, I'm thinking, I have never seen anybody play volleyball in southern Malawi, but you know, anything's possible. So I contacted Uncle Al Rolfing and said, hey, man, can you bring a net? They're bringing volleyballs and we'll figure the poles out when we get there. So we get there and you've got the volleyballs. We send you and your cousin to the market and you guys figure out how the volleyball poles need to be, where the hooks need to go. You come back, but then we got to set them in some tires. And for that, we have you mix up some concrete. And I tell people, you don't have to have construction experience. If you can mix cookie dough, you can mix concrete, just a bigger batter, bigger bowl. And so we set those up. I was amazed. I didn't know what to think. I thought maybe the volleyballs would turn into soccer balls getting kicked under the net. But literally in a matter of hours, the community and the kids took to the game of volleyball and they were playing. It was amazing to me. They loved it. Talk about that.
Yeah, no, that was honestly so cool. It was also cool because I didn't realize until we were at the build site that there was a volleyball net and that there was plans to get like a poles there.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, this is so cool. Because in my mind, I was like, we brought like 6 volleyballs. We're just gonna have some fun. But then it became this thing that I didn't even imagine. So just for me personally, that was really exciting. But yeah, so it's funny when I saw the age of all of the kids. After the first day, I was talking to my mom and I was like, oh, Mom, we made a mistake. We brought like regular volleyballs for like older kids where they have these things called volley lights for young kids.
Okay.
And like even like the net is shorter for young kids. And I was like, oh no, we should have brought volley lights. So I kind of was like, we'll just see how it goes. Oh, it did not matter at all. Like the kids, like you said, they just took to it so well. And I was nervous because soccer's so prominent that they would see this ball and be like, let me kick it. Yeah. But really quickly, like, you know, it was fun trying to explain like how to pass a ball, you know, when I don't speak their language, just using all these like movements, but they caught on so incredibly fast.
Yeah.
Even the kids were like helping like their peer or their neighbor. And the couple of times where students would kick the volleyball, at least one person would run up to them and be like, no, like that's not what it's for. But I think it was just so fun for me to see them so engaged and just filled with joy to try something new.
Yeah. I also loved, you know, I like to go out and give the soccer ball a nice big boot when it's time for the kids to take a break. I think it's great. They always rush it. But usually it's the boys that kind of take that over. Yeah. After we got the volleyball nets set up, I remember walking outside, taking the soccer ball during recess for the kids, giving it the boot, you know, the ball goes way up in there and all the kids rush it. But all the girls in the crowd, you know, and there's a couple hundred kids there, all the girls rush past the boys and don't even look at the soccer ball. And they run up to me and they yell, the girls, the girls, the girls. And I knew exactly, they meant you. They meant you and your cousins.
Uh-huh.
And I went up to the door and they wanted you guys to come out and they wanted to play volleyball with you guys. And I just thought that was wow. That's how relationships happen. How do we go from a busload of people who don't know what to expect? You know, we don't know what to expect when we get there, to a community who has the same thing. That's going on in their head too. They don't know what to expect either. I mean, we've talked about it. We've had meetings, just like we had meetings with you guys. Nobody knows what to expect. And all of a sudden, we are in this new relationship with them because of games, because of the work. So, Danielle, we served at the school all week, but one of the most important things about it, speaking of relationships, is some of the meetings that we have with students and teachers. And I want to focus in for this chat on the meeting with the students. Talk to me about when we sat down in that classroom. We asked them to pick 10 students so we can talk to them and learn more about their lives. Tell us about that.
Yeah, no, I was glad we did that we were able to kind of have one-on-one with some of the kids and some of the students. I think a few things stood out to me in that chat with the kids. And one of those is like, whenever we asked them a question, they were all very honest. And I actually really appreciated that. Like, there was no sugarcoating. Like, they had this mindset of like, oh, you asked, like, yeah, I'm going to tell you these things. I'm going to give you a look into my life because you're asking about it. And I really appreciated that. They disclosed some of the barriers to coming to school, and, it's hard to hear, but I was grateful that they were like giving us that perspective. And then I just think about one of the students. I think you had asked her like, oh, did you think we were going to come back? And she was like, no. And it's just heartbreaking, because it's like, I just felt sorry that for any experience that she's had where someone has made her a promise, an organization has made her a promise, or the village, and then they don't follow through. So I was grateful that we could be there to be like, no, people want to help, people believe in you. I think that was really powerful. And then just being able to show that student the library, because I think the inspiration kind of came from this student when asked like, what, students like, what would you want? And she said she wants books. And then
it's in English.
Yeah. And so then to be able to be like, okay, we built you this new classroom and we heard you, look at this library you have, like, that's just powerful.
Yeah, that whole thing was powerful. And I tell people in those conversations, particularly in places like Malawi, when kids are vulnerable and they're honest, they tell you the social reasons that they can't make it. They also tell you some of the physical reasons that they can't make it, like access. But back to the social reasons, there are no police, there are no social workers, there is no one coming to solve those problems. And that's why it's so important for volunteers like you and your family to travel that far, be that uncomfortable for that amount of time, and be that generous, because they don't think you're coming back. And when you do, it makes all the difference in the world.
For sure.
So, yeah, Danielle, at the end of the trip, we got to do the celebration, and we were on African stretchable time. That's what I call it. I remember trying to get it going, and we kicked on the JBL Bluetooth speaker, and the whole group got up and started singing Sweet Caroline, and that really kicked it off. I wish people could be there, but it felt like a wedding. Talk to us about the conclusion of the trip. Talk to us about a bit about the celebration, but there was a lot of power in that moment when I remember I asked Tato to give Jennifer, your aunt, the keys because she had put it all together, but Jennifer said no, and she gave the keys to you to hand off to the head of school. Just tell us about that.
Yeah. So yeah, the celebration happened with the community, which was really great. And then, yeah, we're like nearing the end, it's time to hand the keys off. And it's like 2 minutes away. And Jen like approaches me and is like, hey, they want me to like hand the key off, but I want you to do it.
Yeah.
And there wasn't enough time for me to be like, no, she's like, just do it. Just do it. I think it would be good for you. And I was like, okay. And once it kind of settled in, I was like, oh, I'm actually really grateful that she's allowing me to do this, or that she thought that I would be good to hand the keys off because of what this build meant.
Yeah.
So yeah, in that moment, I really wanted to make sure when I was handing the keys off that I wasn't just like making it about me. Like, oh, I'm glad I could do this for my grandpa. This classroom's great. Here are the keys. Like, I really wanted to acknowledge, like, he wasn't just a grandpa, he was an uncle, he was a friend, he was an advocate. And I tried to make sure I listed off all of those things in my handoff so that everybody in the room felt like, yes, that was my uncle. Yes, that was my friend, you know? And it felt more powerful than what I thought it was going to be. Like, I was like, oh yeah, I'll hand the keys off. But it kind of became this moment where, you know, I went on this trip for closure. And I think that that moment really helped bring it full circle. And I felt, yeah, I was really glad I was able to do that.
It was one of my favorite moments in the trip. And immediately after, there was clapping, singing, and dancing. And Danielle, most people will tell you I don't dance, but I couldn't help myself. I was so happy. I
Me
was so
too.
happy in that moment.
Me too.
I truly enjoyed serving with you. I truly enjoyed serving with your family. As I told you, usually I get done with these trips and I'm ready to just be done. I get home and I take a few days off, but I woke up on Monday and I missed you guys. And you guys are special. So I just want to tell you thank you for your heart. Thank you for serving. We hope that we're honoring the legacy of your grandpa, Joe Ford. And we hope that you will come back and serve with Be the Change volunteers again. So thank you for sharing your story with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, we will be back. So don't you worry.
Awesome. Well, thank you for listening to our Change Your Chat. If you like Change Your Chats, check out more of them online at www.btcv.us. Also, you can show your financial support for projects like the Joe Ford Classroom in Malawi by going and making a donation at www.btcv.us. Thank you, and be the change.